The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. It's a pleasure to have you join us, and we're very excited to host you with today's webinar, which is really about looking forward for 2023. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss how do you engineer, and that's the key word, engineer, your revenue growth for 2023. And we're going to focus on new customer acquisition best practices. So for those of you that have joined us in the past, you notice that we're innovators, we're leaders in terms of revenue growth, revenue acceleration, revenue strategy, and we bring tremendous insight, experience, and innovations to the table each and every time we meet. So today we're going to talk about how do you go out there and go win a market. Could be a vertical, could be a geographical, could be an SMB versus enterprise. But there are markets that for you to own, markets for you to dominate, markets for you to win. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the difference between a competing and a winning strategy. And most importantly, we're going to really set the foundation for a successful 2023 for your company and for yourself. As we do with any one of these webinars, we really encourage you to participate in the poll questions, which we'll show to everybody that's participating today. We'll also look for your questions. So if we don't get through your questions during our Q&A session that we have with today's webinar, I'll make sure that I follow up personally with each and every one of you to address whatever outstanding questions that you have. So again, it's a pleasure to have you here today. We're doing something different this year at On Demand Advisors. And if you think about it, there are a number of different ways, we call them revenue vectors, for you to scale and grow revenue growth for 2023. So we've got, instead of one webinar, we've got four that we're inviting you to join us. This is the first of the series. And so today we're going to focus on new customer acquisition. What does it take to put this engine in place that is going to give you predictable, intentional, profitable, and capital efficient revenue growth? And how are you going to get there? How are you going to go through the process of putting this in? And now is the time to start preparing for your success next year. In a couple of weeks, we're going to focus on customer upsell and cross-sell. Something I talk about all the time, which is wallet share. What should your wallet share be with customers? So we've worked with a lot of B2B companies where they have a plethora, an array of different solutions, and they find that they fall short typically in terms of selling those solutions to their current customers. So we're going to address that today. In fact, one of our clients today actually has 4 customer meetings that we've set up for them to do their annual business review. And there's tremendous additional uptake that happens with every one of these meetings that occurs. So we'll be discussing that in a couple of weeks. On December 20th, we're going to talk about new solution launch. That could be a service, it could be a solution that you're launching. Now, what I found as a CEO for quite a few different companies is that it's very easy to think about the investment and the strategy and the methodology of bringing a new service or a new solution to market. But once you bring it to market, the question is, are you getting the incremental or accretive revenue that you're looking for from that solution? Many of you may say, no, I'm not. So we're going to talk about how do you think about launching a new solution or service, and then how do you plan for that? And then finally, on January 12th, we're going to talk about channel partners. Many of you may have partner programs today, but what we find with a lot of companies is they have a lot of partners that aren't producing revenue. So we're going to talk about how do you select the right partners and how do you ensure that your partners are going to contribute to your revenue share and your revenue growth. For each of the webinars, including today's webinar too, we're going to walk you through at the very end a client example. This is a client that has implemented these practices with us and been very successful at achieving their outcomes. So we really wanted to make sure that this is something that you take away and say, I identify with that client, I identify with what their challenges were, and I identify with what On-Demand Advisors was able to succeed in helping them achieve their success. In terms of the leadership for On-Demand Advisors, Craig and I founded this company a number of years ago as a global revenue acceleration agency. For myself, I've been a serial CEO. One of those companies we'll talk about, Intact Software as a Service company, where Craig and I worked together, myself as the CEO, Craig as the CMO, and talk a little bit about that background. I've had the good fortune of building quite a few different B2B companies at different stages, from the startup through the mid stage through the large public companies. And so we're going to be talking about business practices, best practices that you can apply regardless of the stage that you're at. Craig's had a tremendous background today in terms of both marketing and marketing strategy, and being a branding expert earlier in his career, working with some of the largest digital branding companies in San Francisco, and really helping companies really think holistically about their brand and how they're going to win in the marketplace in terms of the branding and brand management. That then turned to his next role, which becoming a CMO, a serial CMO at quite a few number of companies in Silicon Valley. And that's where Craig and I hooked up a number of years ago at Intact as we were scaling Intact. So one of the things I'll share with you today is something that we created a number of years ago called the Revenue Acceleration System. Now, each of you today need this. You need a revenue acceleration system for your company. It's going to be tailored specifically to what you need at your company and your needs. But every company I know needs a very predictable way that they're going to think about how they're going to grow revenue. They've got to have a predictable system, and revenue growth, revenue creation is a connected process. Just like many of the other processes that you have today that operate for your company, whether those are financial processes, whether those are services that you have for your customers, whether those are some of the processes that you may have in terms of engineering software or services. These are different connected processes that have to be perfected. They have to leverage best practices, and they have to work. Because if they don't, then that holds you back from scaling and being successful in terms of achieving your vision and your goals for the year. So this is the revenue acceleration system. And today we're not going to spend a lot of time on any one of these areas. We're going to spend most of it on number 3, which is how to create this revenue acceleration engine. You'll notice down below in purple, we have strategy, red is marketing, yellow is sales, and green is partnerships or strategic alliances. You'll notice down here we have 3 funnels. The first one is the marketing funnel, and that's the one we're going to focus on today, because if you create significant, meaningful demand for your solutions and your services every month, that's going to get the flywheel going, as I say, because those marketing qualified leads are going to translate into qualified sales opportunities, and those qualified sales opportunities are going to translate into customers. And that's really key. So we're going to talk about the best practices and the way from our proprietary approach to really put in these best practices and achieve the goal that you have here. The second funnel is converting those market qualified leads into sales qualified leads. Each of us have champions that we're working with that are prospects at these different companies or customers. And so what do we do to enable our champions to be successful? How do we actually enable them to be in a position where they can cost justify these solutions, these services, and be successful in their career? And then finally over here in sales, it's about how do you take all these well-qualified sales opportunities to close? What do you do to have velocity? What do you do to have efficiency? What do you do to scale your sales organization and have consistent performance across your sales teams? So these are all topics that are near and dear to our heart, and that we share with you best practices each and every day. Now what I'd like to do is start off with 2 polls if I could, and please take time to participate in each of these. It's really helpful for us to get your participation, and it's also really helpful for us to share that with the audience. So what's your goal when you're thinking about 2023 next year? Is it to keep revenue the same as this year in 2022? Is it to grow revenue by 10%, 25%, 50%, or double revenue year over year? And if for some reason you say, well, our goal is to go to 70%, then choose the one that is closest to you. But go ahead, if you could, and participate in the poll, and I'll show the response here in just a few seconds. Okay, so thank you everybody for your participation. It's really helpful, meaningful for us in terms of our interactive approach that we have today. Okay, I'm going to now close the poll and share the response. Okay, well, thankfully, nobody says that they want to grow revenue at the same as this year. Obviously, you're looking forward to what you want to be able to accomplish. So on the 30% growth, basically what we have here is, I'm sorry, 30% of you are stating that you'd like to grow revenue by 25%. 50%, which is fantastic, would like to grow revenue by 50% year over year. And then 20% stated you'd like to grow revenue by 100%. By the way, the client example we're going to walk you through today is a client that we worked with to actually help them grow revenue by 100% year over year, and do that directly for 4 years. So that's great to get your feedback. Okay, let's look at one more poll. And this is a choose all that apply, if you will. So here what we're asking is, what's your biggest challenges that you have today to growing revenue? We're all faced with headwinds that we have with our business. And the question is, which ones are the most important from your perspective? When you look at your audience that you're selling to today, is your challenge that you need to understand your buyer or decision maker and the priorities better? Is it perhaps you don't have the resources internally to scale your marketing efforts? Is it that you're looking more for quality sales opportunities that your sales team can close? Is the issue that you're looking for consistent demand creation, demand generation? Or is it that you're looking for better performance from your sales organization? Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to everybody filling in their thoughts there. Okay, just another second or two, and then we'll close this off. Okay, let me show you the results. So 32% of you stated that you need better understanding of your buyer, your decision makers, and their priorities. 45% stated that you don't have the resources internally to scale your marketing efforts. 68%, and by the way, this is the proverbial leader each and every time, is that you need more quality sales leads. When I talk about quality sales leads, by the way, or opportunities, it's really those that fit your sweet spot, those that you really want. If you're like me and you would, let's say, have an enterprise customer that you find it's the right people, it's the right solution, it's the right fit, it's rightly profitable, and so forth. What you're really looking for is, how do I get 50 more of them? In addition, 55% of you stated that you need more consistent demand creation. And one of our new clients that we're working with state that they get a lot of spikes. So they get maybe a great campaign or a trade show or something like that happens, but then it goes down to a trickle. And so their issue is consistency. And by the way, most of the public companies out there today need that consistency so that they can make sure that they hit their numbers each and every quarter in terms of guidance. And then 27% of you stated that you need better sales performance. So thank you for participating in those two polls. It's fantastic. What we'd like to do today is talk about, how do you put in what we call the revenue acceleration engine? The revenue acceleration engine is this scalable vehicle that you're going to use for scaling your revenue. And it really starts in marketing. It starts in terms of what you're going to put in place to create this engine. And the nice thing about the engine is that if it's a well-tuned engine, when you put your foot on the pedal, you can press and get more out of it. And this is always true. So if you're successful in, let's say, growing revenue this year by 50% year over year, then next year in 2024, the following year, then you're stating it's like, well, okay, now we want to do 75% year over year. So this is about putting in a system, an engine. But here's one of the keys I find as I work with CEOs and executives across the board, and that is you really need transparency. What you don't need is a black box. So a lot of times when I work with different executives, CEOs, COOs, chief revenue officers, and so forth, what they don't want is they don't want just to hire somebody and hope for the best. They want to really understand basically if they're going to serve spaghetti dinner, how is a spaghetti dinner made? What goes into it to make it great? And so that's really what this is. This is about how do you put in this engine and how do you do it so you fully understand it, it's transparent to you, but you can then scale it and take it with you. So we're going to walk you through 5 different areas. The first is how do you create an intentional revenue acceleration plan? The second is messaging strategically to your decision makers. The third is creating your buyer engagement journey. How do you engage your buyer? What's the buyer's journey that needs to be engaged for? And then how do you set that up? How do you make that efficient? How do you have velocity with that? The fourth area we're going to discuss is implementing and executing your campaigns and the underlying solutions that need to help you be able to scale. And then finally, evaluating and improving your revenue acceleration engine. And this is when we're going to talk about one of our clients that was able to do that, because proof's in the pudding. When you have a great proven system like this, or an engine in this case, you want to say, okay, so what's the data points that tells me that this works? Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking through with you today. Let's start with number 1. So creating your intentional revenue acceleration plan. The word here that I think is important is intentional. Why is it important? It's important for us to know who you want as a client. It's important for us to figure out um, in the sea of 55 million contacts out there and X number of million of companies, which ones are a good fit for you. And it's really important to engage that audience and do it in a meaningful way. So there's a number of things that we look at that you need to implement, and we help you implement um, because that's what we do. And by the way, just a quick note on our company. On-Demand Advisors isn't just about best practices for revenue growth, even though that's something we're going to talk about today. We help you implement this with your team, and if you don't have a team, we help you implement it for you. So the objective here is not to have a great plan or great business practices. The objective is to help you execute and achieve your success. And that's part of our DNA. So what we want to do is walk you through some of these keys here in terms of creating your intentional revenue acceleration plan. So the first thing here is focusing on what's your ideal customer profile. All of us have clients. All of us have customers. The question is, which ones are the most successful? Which ones are the most collaborative? Which ones are the most profitable for us? Which ones would you say are most strategic? Which customers represent the best implementation for your services or solutions? Which ones leverage all the value that you can bring to the table? Where do you have the best alignment? So when you sit down and think about your customers, and let's say you have 500 customers, I would bet it would be very easy for you to start thinking about what are the top 10 and what makes them the top 10. Once we understand that, you can start thinking about, well, that's great. Now that I know that all customers are not equal, how do we focus our efforts on more of them? The next area, being intentional, is really understanding your numbers. So for instance, let's say for 2023, your goal is to increase incremental revenue by $8 million. Well, the question is, where does that $8 million come from? How are we going to get from here to there? So we're going to do something that we talk about, which is revenue engineering. And it's something proprietary that we've created along the way. But I think once you see it, you'll say, wow, that's exactly what I need. So because we're focusing on new customer acquisition, of the 8 million that you need for next year, 4 million is going to come through new customers. It's going to come to you through the new customer acquisition. And what we do in revenue engineering is exactly what you see here. And we could do this by industry. So for instance, you may be focused on 3 industries. We could do this by solution. Perhaps you have 5 solutions and we're going to have a set of funnels for each solution. It could be focused on geography. You may look at your business on America, Asia Pac, and EMEA as an example. So there are a lot of ways that we can look at these 3 funnels, but it's really important. This first funnel is the marketing funnel. You could call this top of funnel if you have one funnel, but it's marketing funnel. The middle funnel is what we call the lead development funnel. That's where leads need to be developed. That's where you work with your champion to actually move them through the buyer engagement process. And the last one is sales. That's your sales funnel. That's where you have everything sitting in your CRM system. And that's really where you're going to take these well-qualified sales qualified leads and opportunities and bring them to closure. Now, what you see here is we've done some math. We said to get to $4 million, we're going to need 40 transactions because your ACV, annual contract value, is typically $100,000. Most of you today do know what your conversion rate is for sales opportunities to close. So in this case, it's 1 out of 4. And so when we sit down with you, we typically go through this exercise. Now, this last funnel that we spend all of our time looking at as executives is fed by this funnel here, which is your lead development funnel. Now, for most B2B companies, the conversion rate in this funnel is about 10%, meaning for everybody that's interested in your company, interested in your services or solutions, about 10% of them typically are sales ready or sales qualified. So that means that there's about 90% that are not. What are you going to do with that 90% that aren't ready to buy from you yet, aren't ready to go through that process? We're going to talk about that today because it's very important. And then here's your marketing funnel. So when we do the math here, we say you need to create 1,600 market qualified leads throughout next year in 2023. You need to graduate or convert those 1,600 into 160 sales qualified leads, which is 10%. And then you need to take those 160 sales qualified leads and convert them into 40 customers, which is, again, a conversion rate of 25%. Now, your conversion rates may vary, but this is what we model. What we do then at the annual basis for 2023 is we say, let's break this down into monthly areas. So we need 133 MQLs. They need to close into 13 SQLs, and those 13 SQLs need to close into 3.4 customers per month. When you start thinking about your business this way, it starts giving you really good detailed visibility to what's happening in terms of marketing, sales, business development. It helps you stay on track, which is important to all of us. And it gives you the opportunity to truly engineer the outcomes you're looking for. Now, we talked about the $4 million coming from new customers. In the upcoming webinars, we're going to talk about how do you get the additional $1 million from customer upsell, cross-sell? How do you get another $2.5 million through your channel sales partners that you have? And then how do you get another $500,000 in your new services or solution launch that you have for 2023? Okay. And then finally, in this intentional strategy that we talk about as part of the engine, it's important to reach your target audience. And I can't stress this enough. we've engaged with chief executives all over the world, and we've done workshops in just about every major city. And it's interesting, we always ask a question, what percentage of your target audience are you reaching today? And invariably, it's less than 10%. So one of the things that we help our clients do is implement a reach strategy so that you can get to 100% of your target audience. That's really key. And there's a number of vehicles like Zoom Info or Apollo.io that we actually work with. There are many other good solutions, but these are just two that we would bring to the table. Okay, so that's the first segment, which is your intentional revenue acceleration plan. Let's talk about the second one, which is all about messaging and positioning. You know, it's interesting. As I work with many different companies, and Craig and I are involved with the management team and looking at how they message today, a lot of companies message very tactically. They don't message strategically. And that's a problem because if you message to, let's say I have a software solution and I message about that's a supply chain visibility solution. That's great. But how do you message to the VP of supply chain? How do you message to the executives within that company? Because it's going to be necessary for you to extract the value, present the value that you can deliver to that company. Let's say the company is Boeing and they want better visibility to their supply chain because the supply chain is broken. That's really important to them, but you've got to have messaging that takes you there. So let's talk about how do you get from here to there. In this infographic, we've got 4 elevators. Now, most of you, for your solutions, you do a great job talking about whether it's a service or solution. What are the features, the functions, the capabilities that you have today? And perhaps what are even the advantages? That's getting you to the first floor. That's interesting, and we all do that, but we want to go to the next floor. The next floor is what are the business challenges that you're helping your clients, your prospects, your target audience address and eliminate? What's the value that you have? How do you tie those two together? So in many cases, what we'll do, we'll actually conduct a strategic messaging workshop where we flesh out all of the business challenges, all of the values that you have, and then really prioritize that. How do we take this up to the next level? A more strategic way to present your solution. Well, what's the business process that you optimize? And what's the value that's delivered there? So for instance, if you were providing a supply chain solution for supply chain visibility, it would be great to be able to talk about the visibility that you're providing to the different stakeholders. But what's really important is if you can talk about how you increase the stability and the efficiency of the supply chain, how you eliminate downtime or interruptions in the supply chain proactively. This is really looking at it from an end-to-end perspective as you're doing in elevator number 3. In elevator number 4, the ultimate, taking you to the penthouse. This is about focusing on what are the outcomes you're delivering and what's the ROI that's being created. This is really important because I see a lot of companies, when they implement their solution, they implement the solution to get somebody live and in production. They don't implement it with ROI in mind. So the question is, what is the ROI? If somebody invests $250,000 in your solution, are they getting $500,000 of value in the first year? Are they getting $1 million? Are they getting $5 million? It's great to be able to look at that and figure that out. The second thing you like to do is once you've established your messaging and positioning, is validate that with your target audience. Now, we've done hundreds of these buyer intelligence surveys, and what we found is that there's nothing more valuable than this because this gets you to where the truth is. The truth is in the mind of the beholder, the mind of the buyer, and really looking at validating your assumptions. Once you've gone through that, and we conduct this buyer intelligence survey for you, then what you can do is create the potent messages. Craig talks about something that we've created called the the core messaging document, which is what we create for our clients. And it's really the distillation of what's important to your audience. And from there, then we can create all of the different offers that are going to be required to enable the buyer's journey. So let's just recap this section. In one area over here, we're talking about strategic messaging and elevating your value propositions to your stakeholders. Here, we're talking about validation. Let's validate what's important to people, because we really want to be in a position where they could see exactly what's important to them. And you can get them to prioritize this. So it's not unusual when we look at conducting surveys with a client where they think certain things are going to be really important, and they find through the process of a rigorous, statistically relevant survey that something else is really important, or other things are really important to their stakeholders. And then finally, what are the industry trends? What are the challenges in the industry? What are the trends? And how do you tie those together with your solution? All those three inputs become part of your core messaging document and become enablers for your buyer engagement roadmap. So let's talk about the third area of putting in this engine, and that is engaging your buyer. How do you engage your buyer? How do you do it in a really meaningful way? Well, as we showed you the three funnels, there's top of funnel, which is the first funnel. That's about educating your champion. The middle funnel, or your lead development funnel, is how do you develop your champion? And then your bottom funnel is how do you enable the buyer's journey in the sales cycle? Now, there are lots of different deliverables that we work with you to typically offer and engage every month. And I just wanted to highlight a few of these. So at the top of funnel, it could be explainer videos about what do you do that's disruptive, that's fantastic. It could be thought leadership webinars. We have a client this afternoon that we're helping them host a thought leadership webinar specifically targeted for nonprofits or not-for-profits. And so they're going to really talk about what are the key trends happening in the not-for-profit space in 2023. They're going to talk about how do you actually put in a talent management strategy for your company. They're going to talk about how do you take that human capital and really optimize human capital for the mission of your nonprofit. It's exciting when you put that in place. In the middle funnel here, sorry about that. In the middle funnel, we're really talking about what are some things that your champion needs. So we'll create things like a buyer's guide. Gee, I don't know how to buy this type of service or solution. Wouldn't it be great if you could help me understand that? Or an ROI guide. I don't really know how I'm going to cost justify this type of investment, but give me the guidelines, what I should be looking for. What are the levers I should be looking at? An explainer demo. Wouldn't that be great to have a level 1 explainer demo that you could send out to different individuals to give them really some insight in terms of what your solution or service does and explain it to them. Success stories, gotta love those, which especially if they're ROI based. And then at the bottom of the funnel, it's really talking about things like customer case studies or industry case studies. It's talking about what we talk about, which is the implementation success blueprint. Or it's talking about what we actually help facilitate in many cases with our clients is strategic deal review. So looking at the different strategic deals that you have that you're trying to close, and how do you actually have the right closing strategy to maximize both time and also money in terms of each of these different opportunities. So this is a little bit more in terms of looking at that third phase. The fourth one is implementing and executing the buyer engagement campaigns. This is really about managing the entire customer life cycle from lead to close as you're thinking about that and then beyond. And it's talking about implementing the strategic marketing and sales platforms that you're going to need. We talk about something called the RPC, and we're going to walk you through that today. We call it the Revenue Performance Center. We're going to talk about a sales-driven website, another on-demand advisors innovation, and then getting visibility and insights into your customer. So let's look at this from a implementation. Each of you have a CRM system in place today. You may also have a marketing automation system. Let's say it's Salesforce and Pardot. Let's say it's HubSpot. Let's say it's Marketo. Let's say it's whatever. And we've seen them all. What we find a lot of people do is they turn on these systems, but they're not optimized for the end-to-end process. They don't help you accelerate that. They don't help you accelerate what needs to take place between marketing and sales and business development. And so we're always focusing on the best practices to put this in and optimize this for you. In addition, we've created something called the Revenue Performance Center. And this is one of our clients' technical toolboxes. Very successful company in Houston that we've helped grow revenue 25% each year. And one of the things we found as we created all of these sales tools for them is we needed a repository that was organized by sales stage, by the buying process, that they could use to engage with their target audience. And this is the Revenue Performance Center. And it's really been helpful in terms of streamlining how they engage and using all of these assets in a very meaningful, productive way. And then the next area we want to talk about is a sales-driven website. Another interesting innovation that we've created at On-Demand Advisors. If you go to most websites, go to your own website, think about this. Does your website help you advance the buying and selling process? Does your website do all of the upfront education? Well, at Technical Toolboxes, we created their website for them. And you can see, depending upon by persona or by solution, we take them through the buyer's journey. What are the challenges that you solve? If I'm a corrosion engineer, what are the challenges you help me solve? What are the solutions you provide? What are the frequently asked questions that you're going to be asked each and every time? Who are clients that are using these type of solutions today in my industry? And what are the next steps? Would it be a buyer's guide? Would it be an explainer video? Would it be a success story? Would it be an assessment? There's so many different things that you can do. But here, can you see this? This is just fantastic in terms of helping you accelerate this process. The reason why this is important is because one of the things that the Corporate Executive Board has stated is that 57% of the sales process is already completed by the time the prospect engages with the salesperson. That's why the digital journey here is so important for you to take advantage of that. So that's the fourth part that we talked about. The fifth part, obviously, is about the continual validation that you have with decision makers, really determine what's working and what's not, and then how do you anchor and adjust. And then really figure out, this is really about marketing, but how do you think beyond this? So because we're a revenue acceleration agency, we're always thinking about how do you take something from great marketing through great lead development through great sales. And how do we perfect each and every one of those areas? Because you don't want to treat them as silos. You want to eliminate silos and to have this one continuous process of customer engagement. And when you look at how this gets manifested, we wanted to give you an example too, because not only is this about driving the quality and quantity of lead volume that you need. Remember, this was the number one thing that you said was holding you back, which is not having enough high quality leads for your sales team. And that's always the number one issue that most executives have when they're trying to scale their companies. Now let's talk about one of our customers. Advent Exchange is just a tremendous company. It's a SaaS company, cloud company, focused on accounts payable, invoice presentment, e-payment solutions. And we began working with them a number of years ago. And I remember when we began working with them at the very beginning, they were $6.5 million. They were focused on one vertical, and revenue was flat. And what they wanted us to do is work with them as a strategic partner and help them figure out how to double revenue every year going forward. Fast forward 4 years later, they were $65 million, and we helped them double revenue every year going forward. Now, I talked earlier about the need to always fill the gaps. Well, one of the gaps that they had is they didn't have a marketing team in place. So we were their marketing team in place. We actually led marketing for them. Craig was in charge of that with our team. We went in there, provided the resources and expertise in marketing strategically and tactically to get the job done day in and day out. And in the end, we helped them recruit the best people into the market, into the company, and into marketing, and make sure that that DNA was firmly entrenched with that group going forward to continue to scale. Now, when we began working with them, they were about 38 leads per month that they were generating through their efforts. And what we ended up doing instead was generating 300 leads per month. So about a 10x in terms of where we were. They really didn't have much going on in terms of campaigns. Like a lot of companies, they were going to trade shows. They had great customer referrals, and they also had some nascent programs. But we really put in that weekly regimen. We put in this engine, this revenue acceleration engine for them. So the other thing that we found is that as we created 300 leads per month, we also needed to provide lead qualifiers. Well, it's typically called sales development representatives or BDRs, business development representatives, to actually help qualify and further develop these leads. We put in their sales-driven website, and one of the important things is we moved their messaging from what was really kind of commoditized, which is AP automation, into something very unique around strategic messaging, around e-payment solutions, paperless invoicing. We moved from what I call a competing to a winning strategy, and then we helped them get into 6 new industries. So the first thing was to win the property management industry, which they had been in for 13 years. Then the second thing was, how do we intelligently get into 6 new industries that are really the target industries that you want to go after, and then have the same winning strategy to go do that. One of the things that we look at for these subscription-based companies too is what's called CAC, so that your customer acquisition cost. And in this case, their break even for a new customer was about 3 years. What you really want it to be is about 9 to 12 months. And so we were able to help them move to an inside sales model, best practices, and then reduce their CAC all the way down to 9 months. And then finally, outcomes. We helped them double revenue every year. That led to Bain Capital investing $250 million into the company, and it led to an IPO in 2021. So just phenomenal outcome. But we are privileged to be part of that process. We are privileged that we were the catalyst to come in and work with Mike and the team and really help them really unlock the value of their organization. And if there's one thought you could take away from today as you're thinking about going into 2023, it's about unlocking your potential, being able to achieve the potential that you have fully in front of you. Many of you today have created tremendous solutions, tremendous services, but you're just not reaching your audience, or the way you're trying to reach them isn't working, or you're just looking for a catalyst to move the ball forward. And so this future is available to you. It starts with putting in an engine that we talked about today to bring aboard all the new customers that you're going after in your target markets. And we walked you through each of these different areas: the intentional revenue acceleration plan, messaging and uplifting to strategic value, creating a buyer engagement roadmap in the journey. And by the way, the journey can be very specific based upon personas. It could be based upon like titles. It could be based upon industries. So you may have a very different journey for each industry and so forth. Implementing buyer engagement, sales velocity, and then really being in a situation to anchor and adjust to achieve the goals that you have. That's what we help our clients put in, is this incredible engine for growth, for success. And the backdrop of this is the overall system. So if you think about this engine here, if we get this first funnel full for you each and every month, each and every quarter, each and every year, you're now going to be in a position where we can start focusing on these next areas, which is how do we convert all of that great demand into highly qualified sales leads, and then how do we create those sales leads and opportunities, and then convert them into customers. That's really about engineering your revenue growth. So what I like to do at this point in time is open this up for Q&A. And by the way, all questions are good. We love your questions. So please go ahead and post the questions that you have here, and we'll try to make sure we get through as many as we can. This one is from James. James says, do I need to implement everything that you covered today? That's a good question. The answer is no. You don't need to implement everything because not everybody can implement everything. But a good way to think about this is a progressive meal. So we're going to start with the appetizer first. We're going to start what's important to get started, but then we look at what needs to be implemented in succession going forward. And we do have a way that we're going to talk in a few moments about how to bring that together. But thanks for that, because what we really need to do is kind of get going. This next question is from Lori. Lori says, I survey my customers. Is that sufficient? Good question. Most companies do a pretty good job, Lori, surveying their current customers. When we talk about the buyer intelligence survey, we're really talking about prospects, because what we found is that surveys are really relevant for both groups, customers and non-customers. The key for interviewing non-customers is try to determine what's going to cause them to engage and buy. The key for looking at current customers is truly figuring out what is it that they need that they're not getting today, or that they already are looking for additional value from you. So I talk about customers being incrementalist, meaning they're looking for incremental value, whereas prospects are really looking at what's going to cause them to become a customer in the first place. So good question. Appreciate that, Lori. Here's another question. This one is from Tanya. Tanya says, we are an early stage company. Where do we start? It's a good question. And what I'd like to do is just suggest that this might be a good place for you to think about starting. One is, let's just have a conversation. Let's talk about your revenue goals that you have for 2023 and your plans underway to think about how you're going to get there. Another approach that we find that has the greatest chance of success is creating your revenue acceleration playbook. When we do the playbook, by the way, and we talk about putting a playbook in place, what we're really talking about is a very comprehensive way to look at what's your strategy and goals for 2023. How do you assess where you are today? We love to assess where you are today, what's in place, what's missing, and then figure out where the gaps are between what's in place and revenue growth best practices that you need to scale the organization. And then what we do is finally give you a blueprint on how to go from here to there, and then help you execute that blueprint. Put it in place, achieve success, and be your very best. Another thing that we'd like to suggest is attending our upcoming webinars that we have coming up, because we talked about the 4 different revenue growth vectors: new customers, upsell, cross-sell, looking at new solution launch, and then your partner channel. If you could optimize all those different revenue growth vectors, wouldn't that be fantastic for your company? Be hitting on all cylinders and really achieving your type of success. So this is really, really good. By the way, for all that you are attending, we are recording this session as we record every session. And so we want to make sure that you understand that you can take this recording and share it with your audience. Okay, here's a question that we have. How long does it take to create the engine? Uh, the answer is usually a quarter. So when we work with you and we put together the engine and get everything put in place, it's typically a quarter, and then we're off to the races in terms of scaling. So thank you, Femi, for that question. Allison, we are going to deliver the presentation, so that's going to be available to each and every one of you. Here's a question from Melissa. How many touch points are typically required before you get time to meet with a buyer? It's a good question. So it's interesting when you do demand generation. We find it's interesting. Are you selling to an individual or are you selling to a team? And that also will magnify the number of touch points. Another thing is when you say touch points, we typically create a roadmap where you're going to be engaging with your target audience each and every month. And so you're giving them lots of things that they want as far as touch points. And so the key there is to do that. Now, there are some companies, some very extreme companies that we've worked with, where they were selling truly strategic enterprise deals, where there actually were 280 touch points that happened before the sale closed. And so that's not unusual when you're selling to a project team to be able to do that. The other thing that we look at is in this area of lead follow-up. So when you have a market qualified lead, we help you implement what we call the 8-touch program. And the 8-touch program is, how do you follow up to a lead? Most people give up on leads too quickly. And that includes a series of touch points that happen through email, that happen through LinkedIn, that happen through calls. And so great question that you asked there, Melissa, and happy to talk to you further about that offline as far as that question. Another question that came from Scott is, what is a typical timeline to measure results? As I mentioned earlier, it's probably about a quarter. And then you're starting to look at those results and saying, are we getting the volume that we need to in the first funnel? Are we starting to convert those in the second funnel? And are we making success in terms of the third funnel? So great question there, Scott. Appreciate your question. I've got time for maybe one or two more questions. Let's see if we have another question. There's a lot of acronyms and terms we need to dive into, and that's great. Happy to do that. One of the things I try to do is I try to put as much as I can into layman's terms so we understand that together. And so we're not using a lot of, as I call it, technical speak. Here's a question, and this is another question. Do you have an ideal customer partner size, revenue-wise? The answer is no. When you are a startup company, this is really important to you, what we're covering today, because this is about putting in the proper solutions, the proper tracks, laying the tracks, as I call it, because capital is so important. You've got to basically figure out how to do a great job managing your capital. If you're a mid-stage company, what we're talking about today is truly important because it's about scale. And now you've got to basically say, I've got 10 salespeople. I've got to keep them all fed, keep them happy, keep them productive. I've got to make sure we've got that demand generation engine that Bob talked about in place before those salespeople. And we've got to make sure that we've equipped them for success. Now, it's just as true if you're a big company. I worked at Oracle. I worked at Dun & Bradstreet Software. I've worked with SAP. I've worked with many large companies. And in that case, it's all the same because you think big companies have it figured out. And the truth is they don't. They've got a lot of moving parts. And so they've got a lot of new initiatives in those companies. But the one thing is, once you're a public company, you've got to make sure that you don't become an orphan stock. So you do that by making sure you hit your top and bottom line numbers. Here's a question from Melissa. What's the difference between the 60,000 contacts and the 1.6 um, market qualified leads referenced? So contacts is all of the people that are in your target audience that you want to eventually touch or engage. The MQLs is the market qualified leads. That's when you run your campaigns, you run all that you're doing together in terms of engagement. How many market qualified leads are you creating per year, per month, per quarter? A market qualified lead, by the way, that we're defining is somebody in your target audience that you want to reach that is raising their hand and saying, I want to engage your company. So if I'm, for instance, with Oblong today, or I'm with CloudTrack, I want to reach out to you. I want to engage with your company. I want to download an ebook. I want to attend a webinar. That's what we call a market qualified lead. Okay, let's see if there is time for one more question. Um, just in terms of sharing, this question is about sharing the information on the audio and the slides. Happy to do that. Okay, so that's today's webinar. Please join us now coming up for the next webinar that we're going to have in a couple weeks. The next one we're going to have is on December 6th. That's going to be about customer upsell and cross-sell. Really important that you're maximizing during times like now where you may have economic headwinds. It's really important to go back to your customers and making sure that you're maximizing wallet share. On the 20th, we're going to talk about new solution launch. And then on the 12th of January, we're going to talk about something that I really love to talk about, which is channel partners. At Intact, half of our revenue came through channel partners that we had. So making that indirect channel work really well is really important. So thank you for joining us for today on Engineering Your Revenue Growth for 2023. On behalf of myself, Craig, and our entire On-Demand Advisors team, thank you for joining us. We wish you a very warm and enjoyable Thanksgiving and look forward to following up with each and every one of you today.